Good evening, America, and welcome to your Monday edition of Just the News, No Noise. I'm your host, John Solomon, reporting to you as always from Washington, D.C. Just hours ago, disbarred attorney and convicted perjurer Michael Cohen put the credibility he had left on the line as he took the stand in former President Donald Trump's New York hush money case. I put that in quote marks. Cohen, who was acting as Trump's former lawyer and fixer at the time, is the most significant witness for District Attorney Alvin Bragg's prosecution team to date. Today, he told the court that he actually was secretly recording his former boss, Donald Trump, in a private conversation, which he claimed he was using for the purpose of ensuring loyalty to one of their friends, David Pecker, the publisher of the National Enquirer. He had testified earlier in the case. He's the guy who claimed that he used his publication to catch and kill negative stories about Donald Trump up in the 2016 election. Now, there was a lot of smoke and some fireworks in the New York courtroom today. Keep in mind, Bragg's entire case against the 2024 presumptive GOP nominee centers on the payment scheme and whether the former president falsified business records in order to conceal, quote unquote, unlawful activity. A lot of people doubt the underpinnings of that case. We'll be diving into that latest of this case with Alan Dershowitz in just a few moments. But first, my amazing co-host Amanda Head rejoins me, as she always does, from Los Angeles to give us more of the latest headlines. Amanda, how's it going? Happy Monday.
Good. Happy Monday to you too. Good evening, everybody. Some big news grabbing the media's attention right now, of course, revolves around House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer announcing that he has concerns over the constitutionality of President Joe Biden's executive order that was implemented for federal government agencies to engage in and promote access to voting. Now, with great thanks to the White House's lack of transparency, the Oversight Committee is asking Biden's Office of Management and Budget Director for documents and communications related to the creation and implementation of this specific order signed by the 46th president. Now, this is a story that we're going to continue to follow, especially as Chairman Comer gave the OMB director a deadline of May 20th. Meanwhile, just hours ago, Chairman Comer announced a markup to consider holding Attorney General Merrick Garland in contempt of Congress over his failure to comply with a subpoena that was issued back in February for records including transcripts, notes, video, and audio files related to Special Counsel Robert Hur's investigation of President Biden's willful handling of classified information. So perhaps another question to ask Alan in just a few moments. But John, this isn't the news that this administration probably wanted to get on Monday. But what else is on your radar?
Well, listen, other things that are bad news for this administration, polling data showing that President Biden is trailing in 5 battleground states that he previously won in 2020. A lot of panic on the Democratic side, a lot of possibility that the prosecutions of Donald Trump have actually boomerang on Democrats, something our first guest warned about in his incredible book, Get Trump. Joining us right now, Harvard Law Professor Emeritus and the author of several amazing books, including that Get Trump book. He's our good friend, Alan Dershowitz. He joins us right now. Alan, great to have you back on.
Thank you.
All right. So Michael Cohen, he's supposed to be the big star witness for Alvin Bragg. He hauled a lot of laundry and luggage into the courtroom today with his background of credibility issues. How do you think the first day went for him?
Well, I don't think the prosecution is going to rely on his credibility. The closing argument will go something like this. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we did not put Michael Cohen on for you to believe him. We put him on because he had to introduce certain documents, etc. We want you to believe the corroboration of his testimony. Everything he said is corroborated. So they're not going to rely on his truthfulness. But I still don't see the case. I mean, even if you take every word he said seriously, I just don't think there's a crime there. When you list payment that you made to avoid a lawsuit as legal expenses, that's fairly accurate. Even if you think it's inaccurate, it's not criminal, it's not fraudulent. And then the idea that he intended to defraud the voters, my God, if you ever prosecuted candidates for defrauding the voters, every campaign would be conducted from prison. I mean, what do you do with a president like Biden who says, I have Israel's back, and then he denies Israel the right to defend itself? Was it fraudulent to say he had Israel's back? Is it fraudulent to say, close the borders and then he won't close? You just can't use the criminal justice system to make political points this way. Yeah. And so I'm fairly confident this case will be reversed on appeal. But the goal was to get a down and dirty conviction to influence the election, along with a gag order and keeping him in the courtroom. And they're achieving those political goals, even if they are using an improper legal means to do it.
Professor, once the defense gets their bite at the apple and they can do cross-examination, what would you recommend them targeting?
Well, only the points that he made that could conceivably relate to the case, namely that he was more interested in the politics and the political implications, the electoral implications, than in protecting his wife or protecting his brand. That hasn't been mentioned enough. Trump was very concerned about protecting his brand, the Trump brand. And if there's information released about having sex with a porn star, that's even different than having sex with a playmate. A porn star could really hurt the brand. And so the prosecution is going to have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the primary purpose that he paid this hush money had to do only with elections and not with his wife, his family, and his brand. They failed to do that in the Edwards case, and I think they will fail to do it in this case. But this is a Manhattan jury, and who knows what the Manhattan jury will decide to do. They don't want him to be president.
Yeah, that's right. Hope Hicks, of course, prosecution witness, already said that Trump wanted to protect his marriage from, that's why he was making the payments. So they already have one problem on that front already. Alan, I want to turn to something else because you have been a champion of free speech for a very long time, relentlessly so. There are two things that the Biden administration have done in the last couple of weeks: a change to Title IX, a change to the EEOC rules. In both cases, creating potential penalties for people who don't use the preferred pronouns of either an employee, a fellow student, a teacher. Is this kind of wavering into maybe a compelled speech area?
Yes, it is. And anything that has to do with DEI, anything that has to do with intersectionality or, critical race theory, don't tell me what pronouns to use. I'll decide what pronouns to use. I remember I spoke at Yale and I talked about the woman who became a man and the man who became a woman, Chelsea Manning. And I said, when he committed espionage, and people start screaming at me at the audience, not he, she. I said, no, when he committed espionage, he was a man. Well, he was really a woman. He didn't know he was a woman, but he was really a woman. I said, don't tell me what pronouns to use. I am historically correct. When he did the crime, he was a man, and don't blame a woman for what a man did. And, you can have that debate, but don't make me or compel me to do anything like that. That's clearly unconstitutional. That's compelled speech by the government.
Yeah.
Professor, you are a champion of free speech. You are an expert on our Constitution and issues like the First Amendment. As we are watching these protests break out still over campuses across the United States, there seem to be some free speech issues possibly on both sides. Do you see that dynamic playing out at all?
I do. There's no speech issue in going into a building and holding hostage janitors and harassing people. There is a free speech issue. The idiot students had a right to walk out on Jerry Seinfeld yesterday at Duke just because he's Jewish. I mean, remember, Seinfeld has nothing to do with Israel. He didn't speak about Israel. He made jokes and he talked about careers among the students. But they walked out on him because he was Jewish. This is Hitler Youth. So they have the right to walk out, and I have the right to call them bigots. And that's what I'm going to do. Got to run now, but always great to talk to you.
Thank you, Alan. Good to have you on. I know you're on a tight schedule. Good to have you join us today. Amanda, I think there's a lot there. I'm glad we were able to get the professor in before he had to run. First off, let's go back to the Michael Cohen case. It was really striking that he noted that they're going to have a real hard time showing that his intention was to protect the campaign. And one of the things that I haven't heard a lot of, he's the first one to really inject it, the Trump brand. That would be a natural corporate expenditure to protect the Trump brand. That's not something that's actually been put on the table before today, at least not that I've heard.
No, and I think that is an excellent point. I mean, as you talked about, Hope Hicks spoke to the fact that this had much more to do with Donald Trump's protection of his wife and his family than anything else. But the brand absolutely as a corporate expense. I keep thinking to myself, because everyone, we even have referred to Michael Cohen as their star witness. And I just keep thinking to myself, I don't know how the prosecution, I guess in a normal jury scenario, in New York, obviously it's different. I don't know how you rely that much on someone like that and not have something subsequent to it. I just feel like if they expect this to have any type of optics as a fair trial or any type of optics that supports their side, that supports the prosecution of Donald Trump, there's got to be another witness, there's got to be another document, there's got to be some surprise coming down the pike. But I don't think they have it, John. I don't think they do. But I think, best case scenario for Donald Trump, considering the demographics of this jury, unless we get a big surprise, is going to be a hung jury. And that, I think, would actually be a win for Donald Trump.
Yeah, and I think Alan said something, the most declarative I've heard him say it to date, this is going to get reversed on appeal. He said no matter what the jury does, if there's a conviction, it will be reversed on appeal. And I think a lot of the legal experts you and I have been talking to, they've really said that there are so many issues that both the judge in presiding over the case in Bragg, starting with his promises to get Trump during the campaign and then following through, are going to present. It'll be interesting to see how quickly those appeals would go if there was a conviction. It seems to me the appellate process will be a lot slower than the trial process.
Yeah, and John, I wanted to ask you something because over the course of your life in journalism, you've dealt with a lot of attorneys. The admission that Michael Cohen recorded his conversations with his then client, Donald Trump. There are two attorneys on this jury, so I would imagine that's going to kind of at least raise eyebrows, if not red flags with them. Did that seem strange to you?
Again, one of the things that I think it's hard to know when you're not in the courtroom or you're not on the jury yourself, right, and you're having the conversations, but you got to ask yourself, why is Michael Cohen in 2016 recording conversations for a person he's supposed to have attorney-client privilege and to protect that attorney-client privilege with? Those are the sort of things that go to his character. And I think all the way leading up, even in some of the cross-exams and prior witnesses, you know that Michael Cohen's credibility is going to be on display. It's going to be attacked. And I had to plant a seed of doubt. If I'm sitting there thinking, well, this guy's a lawyer, he's recording his client, which could potentially get out and potentially hurt attorney-client privilege. It just seemed like such an odd admission in the first day of his testimony. But I'm sure when the Trump lawyers get their chance, they're going to be zeroing in on that for sure.
Yeah, listen, I know one thing. Today, it was actually kind of difficult to watch the testimony of Michael Cohen. He just oozes mendacity. We're going to have to endure that for at least another day, possibly 2 more days. But what is going to be really interesting and what I'm looking forward to tuning in for, because I know it's going to be fireworks, is exactly that, the cross-examination, because I think that they are going to just absolutely rip him to shreds. And that will be pay-per-view TV. Yeah.
You know, what's most interesting this weekend was perhaps the strongest proof to date that the lawfare strategy just isn't having an effect on the campaign. At least not the effect that the Democrats wanted. Donald Trump draws tens of thousands, an estimated 100,000 people to Wildwood, New Jersey. I mean, the campaign was massive. The rally was massive. And then these new polls come out, and Donald Trump is up in 5 of the battleground states. And one of them, I think, Nevada, up 12. I mean, that's a walkaway, a runaway. Georgia up 8. Whatever effect that the Democrats had hoped that these trials have thus far, it's only making Donald Trump stir. There's got to be some nervousness. I think you saw that with Fareed Zakaria over the weekend, no?
Yeah, I mean, this is not just piercing Joe Biden's blue wall heading into the election. This is absolutely turning that blue wall to rubble. And I mean, that I covered that speech on Saturday, and the crowds were absolutely astounding. I've never seen a crowd like that. Granted, it was on the beach, so I know that was a fine spot, and you had the Ferris wheel in the background. It was incredibly picturesque. It was just amazing. But President Trump drawing those crowds from all of those surrounding states too.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing when a Republican can walk into a blue state and make that blue state's backdrop a sign of success for him. That's what happened on Saturday night. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to be talking to a man who's on the front lines of changing some of the school names back to their original in the Shenandoah Valley, Virginia. We'll have that right after this. Wallet stolen or your cell phone or your car taken, you know what to call it. We call it theft. But now criminals have a new way to steal our most valuable asset, our homes. Older Americans are particularly vulnerable to these types of thefts, and that's because they more often own their homes outright. An 88-year-old Florida woman discovered this the hard way when scammers forged her signature, created a fake deed to her home, and took her property. Those who buy a property from a deed theft scammer often become victims as well. Now, what can you do to protect yourself? Well, that's easy. Home Title Lock is the premier detection technology to protect your home's title. The instant they detect activity or something suspicious, they're mobilizing to help shut it down. We won't know a thief took us off the title until it's too late. The titles to all our homes are easily found online. Now, a criminal or renter, even a family member, simply forges your signature on a home sale form. Then he refiles as the new owner, and bam, your home is not in your name anymore. That's why Home Title Lock is my choice. Find out for free when you use my code JUSTNEWS at sign up. You'll get a free comprehensive scan of your home's title and 30 days of legendary Home Title Lock protection. Free. All you got to do is go to HomeTitleLock.com and use the promo code JUSTNEWS. That's Promo code JustNews at HometitleLock.com.
Welcome back, everybody. Happy Monday to all of you. There was some big news that broke over on justthenews.com late last week regarding how a Virginia school board approved a proposal to restore the names of Confederate military leaders at 2 public schools. This measure reversed the board's expensive 2020 decision to change the names of schools that had been linked to Confederate military leaders, namely Stonewall Jackson and Robert E. Lee, and also Turner Ashby. And this groundbreaking decision to respect our nation's history couldn't have been done without our next guest. Mike Scheibe is a spokesman for the Coalition for Better Schools organization. He joins us to talk about the importance of his work right now. Mike, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to speak with you.
Yeah.
I am just amazed at your success with the trajectory that it seems this country is going. Tell us about this. First of all, congratulations, but how did you make this happen?
Well, it was a collective effort with many of us. The Coalition for Better Schools sprung up after the original name change in 2020, and I joined in sometime in 2021. So it's been a collective grassroots effort that really focused on the way this was done rather than the names themselves, because people were not given a voice in this matter. And the 2020 school board moved along during the COVID shutdowns and did this really with almost zero public input.
Yeah. And that's really the issue for you, right, Mike? It wasn't necessarily whether the name should be the proper names of the school. It was a due process wasn't followed. The people's voice wasn't listened to. Leaders weren't responsive or even interested in finding out what the community wanted. That was what was most important to you, correct?
Yes. I mean, I'm from the Philadelphia area. I'm not a native-born Virginian, and with all the respect I have for history and the history of our entire nation, that was a totally backseat issue. It was the process and the lack of, the citizens' right to be involved in our own government. We were silenced, whether it was purposely or not. We could argue that for days, but that's the bottom line. We were not given a voice in our own government.
Yeah.
Mike, I imagine that people also didn't sign up for the price tag of this name change in 2020. It came with a pretty hefty price tag, didn't it?
Yes, it did. There was a few interesting statements made by the administration and school board at that point that stated they would not use public funds, but they did. And that is a cornerstone or stalwart solid point of ours is to restore the names. There will not be one tax dollar spent. It will be done through private donations, which by my estimations, I'm working now to get a fixed price on the effort. And we have the funding already in place within a reasonable, reachable goal already.
Wow. So a lot has happened since the vote on Friday, a lot of backlash, a lot of meanness. Tell us a little bit about the threats and anger for those who lost on this last vote and what's happening to people who took the vote or who supported this campaign.
Well, it's been rather eye-opening to me. The people who often proclaim diversity, equity, inclusion, and things, it only seems to apply here with something that they want. And that's eye-opening, like I said. The school board has received numerous phone calls. There was a non-credible threat, called or put up on a social media site. There are numerous voicemails and emails threatening school board members, and their tenure or their jobs, because school board members are regular people. They take a public office and they make controversial decisions. sometimes, and the fact their livelihoods could be threatened are quite, that's quite disturbing. And me myself, I mean, I've been dodging phone calls, but I've gotten quite a few real interesting ones that I happen to answer. So it is, it's far from comforting. However, I understand this is a complicated issue and people have their very strong opinions, but there's people now that are crossing the line to antagonize the issue.
Absolutely crossing the line. I wanted to ask you, because this wasn't obviously a bubble. This wasn't in a vacuum. There were numerous other schools across the country. Here in California, they tore down a statue of Ulysses S. Grant, which I would think would be on their side and they would agree with. So I don't know why they would tear it down, but it seems like anything pertaining to history just gets thrown out the window. What you did for these schools, do you expect that to be propagated and see some more reversals across the country?
I mean, do I expect it? It depends on the area, but I hope that people will take this as a sign that they can make a difference in our government. I mean, the Constitution doesn't state that we have the right to be a part of the government, but it certainly implies it across the board. And I hope that it does show that the majority doesn't have to be afraid of backlash or people calling them unwelcome names to make a difference in our country. Civil discourse should be what is the common thing, not the exception to the rule. So I do hope that this expands, but that wasn't the reason why we stood up to this.
Yeah. Mike, you were gracious all throughout this. For you, this was about fairness and due process. Did any of the school board members that you and the group engaged step back from this and say, you know what, we did this the wrong way? Even if we had the right intentions, we did this the wrong way. Has there been some learning for the school board members about how important it is to engage the community, particularly parents of the children that go to these schools?
Well, with the current school board, yes. The school board that made the decisions in 2020 and fought through 2021 and part of 2022, no, not at all. This is a lesson in democracy, or the democratic process, for young people to show that, if elected officials do things that don't go with the will of their majority or of their constituents, that there are consequences, like not returning to office. Yeah. So, we have to remember that, through that's the basis of our country. And, and that is what I hope spreads, but as far as the old school board members, I'm not very confident that they've learned anything here. Because I believe they knew this all along, or they would have agreed to a survey of the public, which we asked for multiple times.
That's right. Yeah.
Mike, you mentioned something a moment ago that I think we've got to press in on before we let you go. We got about 45 seconds left. This was done at the local level. This was not done on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. That effect and that effectiveness happened at the local level. That's the lesson here, right?
Yes, absolutely. And when I was at Old Dominion way too long ago to discuss on national TV, I studied the founding fathers in my initial 2 years of discussion and study, and that is the way our government was designed to be. This is not. I mean, I often joke, hey, we should bring back tar and feathering. It's not fatal, but maybe that would be a way to hold some elected officials accountable at some point.
I would definitely be down for another tea party, that's for sure. I'm always down for any party, though. Mike, thank you so much for being here. You provided a bright spot among some devastating news this week. All right, we're going to take a very quick break, and we'll be right back after these messages.
Welcome back, America. We know the southern border is not just creating problems for the immigration system, it's also putting extraordinary stress on families who are losing a huge number of loved ones to the illegal drugs, particularly fentanyl, that has flowed across this country. It is one of the most extraordinary chemical poisonings in American history. A lot of people have called it a chemical warfare attack on this great nation. Our next guest has been one of the most important sirens, and not only bringing attention to the crisis, but the lack of inaction and the toll that it is taking in every community in America. He is the former Special Operations Director of the Drug Enforcement Administration, and he's our good friend, Derek Maltz Sr. He joins us right now. Derek, great to have you back on the show.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate you. You have been fighting to get the American people to understand how this has unfolded from China to the cartels to our shores here. But I want to start with something that came up over the weekend. We had a story on Just the News, DEA saying that the fentanyl crossing the border today is even more lethal, more deadly. The cocktails are getting more poisonous every time they bring a new shipment over. Why would the cartels want to make something more poisonous and kill their customer base?
The cartels are trying to maximize their profits. That's what they're doing. And they don't really care about the customer. They care about the money. But unfortunately, now that we have the weakest border in America's history, now they're making so much money on the human trafficking, the sex trafficking. And so drugs is just another, way to earn some money. But it's very addictive. It's causing, addiction all throughout America. But unfortunately, kids are dying at record levels. But John, we got to remember that China is the one that started this chemical bombing campaign. I go back as far as 2008, 2009 with the synthetic cannabinoids and cathinones. But, like Chris Wray has been telling everyone repeatedly, how many times do we have to hear that China is the greatest national security threat to our country, but yet we're letting them in at record levels, and they're killing our kids at record levels, and now they're starting the marijuana grow operations all over the country with very high THC marijuana. It's total insanity. And somebody has to be held accountable for this.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, and Chairman Mark Green put out a sheet a few weeks ago and said that 1,000 Chinese nationals have come into this country every month for the past 5 months. I don't want to paint with a broad stroke. I'm sure that some of them are coming here for honest reasons, fleeing China. But I would imagine there's coordination between them and the opioid crisis, right?
100%. And remember, let's not forget that the Chinese nationals are the primary money laundering services for the Mexican cartels. They're picking up bulk cash all over America, and they're laundering the money back to the kingpins in Mexico, and they're doing it in a very efficient manner. They're using encrypted apps. They're using banking apps, and we've never seen this in the history of the country. So business is booming. The production is booming because they're getting the chemicals to the cartels very, very effectively through the ports in Mexico. But you got to remember that at the end of the day, what we really need to look at is what the families are facing. We have 22 teenagers every single month that are dying from fentanyl. We have 320,000 kids have lost their parents over the last 10 years. Like, when is everyone going to wake up to this? This is something we've never seen before. I've been talking about it for 7 years, and we're getting very little traction. The only reason they're talking about it now is because it's an election year. But remember, let's not forget something, that the fentanyl bombing campaign started under President Obama and Vice President Joe Biden. That started back in the day around 2012. So let's make sure it's clear.
Yeah, no, it is absolutely important that we understand where this all began. Also, you mentioned, or Amanda mentioned, the Chinese nationals coming across. There was a warning issued by Homeland Security Department that we got a hold of a couple of months ago that said some of those Chinese nationals are behind these new marijuana grow facilities, particularly in Maine, but also in other parts of the country. China doesn't do anything by accident. People don't leave the country unless China lets them leave the country. Why would China want to send their nationals here to create these marijuana grows?
John, great question. They're very strategic in what they're doing. They understand America is very weak on marijuana. That's why the movement right now is to reschedule marijuana from Schedule 1 to 3. And DOJ has hijacked that process from DEA. But the reality is they understand that the THC that they have in the marijuana today is causing psychosis. It's causing schizophrenia, increased heart attacks and strokes. It's all over the news. So why the hell would you want to reschedule it to a less, class of class 3? It makes no sense. But let's not forget, you always have to remember, why would China be doing that? They want to destabilize and destroy America under the disguise of drug addiction. And they know they can get away with it with marijuana because people are not paying attention to this. And, you know, John, I found out something very interesting. I work closely with many agencies around the country. You want to hear the latest?
Yeah.
And that is that the Chinese are now using Chinese pesticides. Let me repeat that slowly. Chinese pesticides imported from China to spray on their crops. So isn't that a concern? Like, what's the long-term effects of Chinese pesticides? We're concerned about our own pesticides on vegetables and plants in America. Insane.
Wow.
Yeah, where's the GMO crowd? Derek, absent a president who is willing to shut down the border, is there a way for Congress, for governors, for anyone to manufacture a bottleneck in the production and distribution machine to try to stem the flow of this before we can have an election and hopefully have a sea change?
Well, look, great question. Law enforcement is doing a great work. They're seizing records amounts, not only on the border, but internally in America. The problem is, you look like, for example, Austin, Texas, the month of May, the beginning of May, they had a massacre down there. There was like 80 poisoned, 11 dead, 9 to 11 dead. You can't even get accurate reports. That's the other thing that's really irritating. We can't get statistical reports on what's happening. But the only way to shut down this massive bombing of our country is decimating the cartel's labs. We want Mexico to work with us, just like we worked with Colombia in the past. But right now, the Mexican government doesn't seem too concerned about the mass production of poison killing American kids at record levels. So I'm very concerned. The longer we wait, the more kids are dying, the more families are being destroyed. And I have no confidence that the Mexican government really wants to help us. Remember, the cartels are generating, according to the study I read, they're the fifth largest, company or, financial income business for Mexico. Why would they want to shut that down?
Yeah, that's a great point. It's an economy for them. Derek, I want to talk a little bit about two things Biden said he did. He said he talked to the Chinese. They were going to try to cut down or crack down on the precursors. The cartel said last year, we want to get out of the fentanyl business. Meanwhile, fentanyl keeps pouring across. I don't think anyone were serious about what they said, were they?
John, so let me make this clear. Right now, the Chinese have moved on to a more deadly attack with the nitazines, edonitazines, isonitazines, metonitazines, protonitazines, and the xylazine, which we're buying that stuff all over America from the Chinese websites. So basically, they're beyond fentanyl. They're beyond fentanyl precursors. It's more deadly drug.
Insane.
Derek, before we let you go, President Trump, before he left office, had conversations with President Xi regarding how they could shut down that trade. Very, very extreme punishment for Chinese nationals who were producing fentanyl. Would that be the way to return if President Trump gets back in office to shut this down?
Well, there's no doubt that there was some positive negotiations going on, but you got to stay on top of it. Remember, China, Hezbollah, Iran, Mexican cartels, they're going to take advantage of weaknesses. How much clearer can I make it, right? Vulnerabilities and weaknesses is what they take advantage of. So obviously, when we had a change of administration, there was a total weakness. The border was wide open. So they're taking advantage of it. So yes, I am confident that if we have strong policies to keep Americans safe, we can turn this around. We are the greatest country in the world, so we will turn it around with the right leadership.
Yeah. Derek, about 30 seconds left. You do a lot to help the families of victims of fentanyl. Tell us how people watching today could join that effort that you've started.
Well, we have rallies around the country, but there's nonprofits. The actual families are like an army. So you have Song for Charlie, you have Voices for Awareness, you have Lost Voices of Fentanyl. Go on, help them out, participate, learn what's going on. Look at DEA's onepillcankill.gov on the website and start learning. There's a lot to do. The public can do a lot, but they have to first learn about it. We need social media influencers, professional athletes to start getting out there and doing the reels. I've been saying this forever, too. We can't get any momentum because people are not paying attention to what's going on.
As you've said often, silence is complicity in this battle. We have to all speak up and do our part. Derek, you do your part every day. Great honor to have you on the show once again. Thanks so much. All right, folks, we're going to take another brief commercial break, but you'll want to hang around because our next guest will hopefully take you through a wild but fun
Welcome back, everybody. In 2024 in America, well, things aren't great. As we were talking about with our last guest, wide open border, the economy is in the dumps, and as a result, a lot of us are in the dumps as well. So we're going to try to activate our sense of humor in order to get the ability to laugh off anything in life that might be difficult for us right now, which is a lot of things. And we have a very special guest to join us to do just that. Shonda Pierce is an amazing actress, a hilarious stand-up comedian, and is once again an author to a new book that will surely be a New York Times bestseller very, very soon. It's called Life is Funny Until It's Not, a comics story of love, loss, and lunacy. And she joins us to talk about her life's work now. Shonda, great to have you here. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Amanda, and hello to John. You know, I watch you guys. It is hard to find news that I don't want to pick my television up and throw through the window.
That could get expensive
that applies
quickly.
To a lot of things. Yeah. Shonda.
Buy new televisions, you know, because I just get so angry. You know, the life of a comedian right now is probably one of the most necessary things in my life. That I still sell a lot of tickets, I still sell a lot of books and stuff, and I think it's just because you're right. Everybody's at a place where we need to laugh, and at the same time, it is really hard. I almost have to avoid the news about an hour before the show because then my comedy is very angry.
That does it. We do contribute to that. Yes.
I totally get that. What made you want to write your book? Tell our audience about it and what led up to you writing it.
Oh, thanks so much. You know, I think it's going to be my last book. I've been doing this for 32 years.
Wow.
And I think before I left the stage or I parked the bus for a while and I took a break, I wanted everything said. And there's a whole lot, you know, I'm not the only comedian out there that's had a difficult background, but because of my faith and my you know, the market that I work in a lot is good old church folks and clean people who like clean comedy. I didn't want to be one of those people that never told the whole story. Between every peak, you know, of your career and every valley of your personal life, there's a journey in between those two places. And that's where we learn the most about who we are, what we're really made of, what we need to learn better. And that's where you start, you know, really gleaning some good advice to give and to also just say, look, there's a pothole down this part. Don't go down that road.
Yeah, there are. You know, and I think it's so easy for all of us when we see a talented comic like you on television or in a movie, we laugh and we feel good, but sometimes we forget comics are people too. They have the same life struggles that we all do. How do you set that aside? When you go on stage, do you set it aside or does it actually inspire what you're about to do each night?
I think one, it inspires, you know, most definitely. But I always choose before the night is over to leave a little something on us. You remember how Carol Burnett used to always end her show and she'd pull her ear or say, you know, something kind about her grandmother. Those moments, I think, are what endears us to the comic after laughing with them, you know, for an hour or two. I like to use my life, you know, the things I've been through in my life as a way perhaps to inspire. But what I've learned and what I learned from a lot of comics, we do carry a dark side if we're not careful. I think sometimes if we've been prone to a little depression or we've had difficult childhood, we fall in love with comedy even more. We fall in love with laughter even more than the regular kind of fella. At the same time, if you're not careful, you have to remember what part of that is your job and what part of that is not life. I have to be very careful to not be addicted to the instant gratification or the accolades of a great big crowd or, you know, people coming up and saying, oh, you're so funny. Because if you're not careful, when you're off stage, you want to mimic that feeling. And I think that's where a lot of our stand-ups get in trouble, that when they begin to try to mimic that euphoria, it can go south real quick. You mimic it with alcohol or bad relationships or drugs, you know. Mm-hmm. And so I've learned that my high, it really is home and faith and my family, you know. And so I've been blessed, you know, that I've avoided some of those traps a little bit.
Amen.
Shonda, you have an absolutely storied and legendary career. You got your start working at Opryland as Minnie Pearl, the country star with the tag on her hat. First of all, I have to know if you were doing that in the mid to late 80s, because then I definitely saw you there. But tell us a little bit about the start to your career.
You know what's really interesting, Amanda? I grew up in a very, very legalistic, very religious home. And so as a college student, when I went to audition for a theme park to sing and dance, I was worried. I risked hellfire and damnation, let me just say, but I got a job, and I impersonated Minnie Pearl for 6 years. I got to meet her. She was a wonderful, wonderful woman who just loved the sound of laughter. And that's what got me interested and excited about comedy. And then the big trial was talking my mother into it.
That's got to be a big one. Talk a little bit.
To get a bad letter. It's another to get one from your mother that says you're going to hell.
Oh my!
Ouch.
Oh my!
Oh no! Oh gosh! I want to talk just for a little bit about how difficult it is to be a comedian in this era of cancer culture. I think for a while there was almost nothing you could say that someone wouldn't find offense to. But in the last few months, it seems like people are letting their hair down again and maybe realizing we lost our humor. Do you feel a little bit of relief that maybe Americans have had enough of the cancer culture?
I think so. I think, especially in comedy, we're slowly tiptoeing our way back. Some are probably a little more scared than others if they're in the middle of really climbing high and working on a great career. I've been at this long enough, John. I'd be so happy to just stay home forever. My mortgage probably would like me to, go back to work.
Yeah.
The hard part is politics. Now, I put up with the opposite side for 4 years now. Every comic out there should send Donald Trump some money, for the material that they've stolen about him and off of him.
Yeah.
But what's so funny, what goes around comes around. And if I make a joke about Biden, oh my Lord, I get the ugly letters, but I don't care. I really don't.
That's awesome.
Shonda, but I've seen this amazing dynamic where they're actually starting to make fun of Joe Biden a little. Now, it's mainly due to his age and things like that. They won't attack the real stuff that's worthy of criticism, like his policies. But why do you think that they're shifting just a little bit?
Because you can't escape it. I mean, it used to be you would have to really search to find a little piece of news, that would be some kind of negative, or you really have to test those waters. Saturday Night Live, I'm like a fan of anybody. I'll sit there and watch those guys all the time. But, they're finally doing a true, look at the sadness, at the nursing home we call a White House right now. That's what they're finally diving into that. And what's so bad, I think it's been very unfair. One side really just hammers Republicans, hammers conservatism. But the good thing is, once the other side gets so bad, the Democrats have such horrible policies, you cannot escape making fun of it, and that's a good thing. When Democrat comics start turning on Biden, I have a great sigh of relief, going, okay, good. I'm not the evil one anymore.
Right. But it had to get this bad. Shonda, we are so blessed by having you on the show. Everybody, check out her new book. We appreciate you so much. You are so funny and bring so much joy to everyone around you.
John Solomon here. As we draw near to another critical election, it's not only about casting your vote, it's about elevating your voice. AMAC is more than a senior discount organization. They unite like-minded patriots like you and I, committed to preserving our cherished values and actively opposing the leftist agenda in America. Just look at their recent victories. AMAC members helped to push forward an investigation into practices that inflate drug prices for all Americans, successfully defeated ranked choice voting in order to protect traditional voting methods, and also helped block a federal takeover of elections. As AMAC's membership grows, more than 2 million strong now, Washington listens. Every new member strengthens this movement. If you love America like I do, visit amac.us/justnews to become a four-year member for only $30. That's a great deal. AMAC is not only better for America, it's better for you. Membership gives you access to the AMAC magazine, free Social Security and Medicare guidance, money-saving discounts, trusted news, sweepstakes, and so much more. Take advantage of our election year sale. 4 years for just $30. Join today and join the 2 million other members just like you who care about this country. They can't ignore your voice. Join now at amac.us/justnews. That's amac, amac.us/justnews. Welcome back, America. I often say the car of life should not have a rear view mirror. You should always be facing forward, never looking to back view mirror, because you'll run into the car in front of you. But in the last few days, Amanda, I feel like a lot of things are going in reverse, and maybe it's a good time to have a rear view mirror just for a little while. Politics in reverse, humor in reverse, right? The cancel culture going in reverse. If Alan Dershowitz turns out to be right, maybe any convictions and this lawfare will be going into reverse when it gets to the appeals court. But it does feel like America and its common sense is sort of backing up on some of the insanity that we've gotten tired of.
I got to tell you, John, I did not have Alan Dershowitz possibly voting Republican. Comedy going back to unwokeness and schools getting renamed Robert E. Lee on my 2024 bingo card. But here we are. It just goes to show you the fighting American spirit, because I know you get this question all the time, as do I, when we're out and about in America. How do we keep fighting? How do we make sure that we don't lose this country? And, there's a quote about the vanquished acknowledging a loss. And until, even when it feels like we're on the losing end of things, if we keep fighting, if we refuse to accept the fact that we're vanquished, then we will continue. This country will be A-OK. Now, what is not great right now is the climate for females who are writing books right now after the controversy of Governor Kristi Noem and her book. We now have former White House press secretary Jen Psaki. So apparently in her book, there's an excerpt about Joe Biden and him looking at his watch when our service members from Afghanistan, when their bodies were coming back to the United States during that ceremony. And of course, huge controversy erupted over that. It was, optics wise, it was just absolutely disrespectful and repugnant. Well, now she says that even though people have criticized her for downplaying, or since they've criticized her for downplaying that moment, that if there are reprints of her book, which everybody knows the reason for reprints, and I'm not sure that will happen here. But if there's a reason for reprint, she's going to make sure she corrects the record on it. Yeah, that's, she has a lot more to correct the record on any time on her podium. I'm sure there's a lot to correct there, too. But I think the most clear thing is I think Americans are ready to kind of correct the record of the 2020 election. I think they're looking for a change. And you start to see all the things that are playing out right now. I haven't seen this much movement in the plates below the political landscape in a very long time, whether it's the 100,000 out at New Jersey, the polling data from the New York Times Siena poll, which tends to skew a little to the left to begin with. There's just a lot of things in the last few days that give us a sign that maybe Americans are looking for a pretty big pendulum shift come November. Yeah. I mean, we know what the top issues are going to be for Americans. It's obviously illegal immigration, economy. I joked about it over the weekend, but in Joe Biden's economy, the devil wears TJ Maxx because nobody can afford Prada at this point. But you look at the turnout at Donald Trump's rally over the weekend, and, we had David Zier, our wonderful David Zier, on the ground there. And he was talking about the record number of people he spoke to who were first-time attendees of a Trump rally. And, of course, it's easy to go there, but especially in New England, because you have so many states and cities and localities that are close together. But people are feeling it. They are feeling the pain on practically every front. And they're thinking to themselves, like Donald Trump said, back in 2016, what have you got to lose? At this point, what do you have to lose? Yeah, and listen, there was a moment in that New Jersey thing, being the football fan that I am, one of my favorite football players of all time, Lawrence Taylor, gets up on stage and he said, I was a Democrat. Donald Trump changed my entire family. And I think he is representative of a lot of people that I've been talking to that say, I've been voting Democrat my whole life, but I'm done. I'm taking a break. I'm finished. You mentioned Alan Dershowitz. Michael Rappaport, another one that said it. There just is this feeling that people are willing to try something different and break the mold. That's what could be the November lesson. I think that's going to be the factor.
Yeah, we'll see how that plays out. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. Tremendous group of guests tonight. Really enjoyed that, including a little laughter at the end of the show. Kevin Sorbo is going to join us tomorrow night. He's got a new project. We're sure to want to hear about that. And also, we've got some Scoopy reporting on January 6th. Keep an eye on that. We should have that next couple days. But right now, we're going to